All right, so let's come back to the topic of colonizing planets. So,
Hmm.
look, I think our audience recognizes that whenever we layer Elon Musk's name onto anything, it
Yeah,
sort of paints it. So, for the purposes of this, I'm going to remove the name of the individual, and we're just going to
sure.
talk about the general topic. And there are those who are supportive of this, and so I'll recite the argument, and I'd love you to respond, and then we'll go a couple layers deeper on this one. So,
Hmm.
the argument would go that, as bold, audacious, and maybe ridiculous as it may sound to colonize another planet like Mars, it is that kind of big, overwhelming, bold thinking in our era that is similar to the big, bold thinking of sending man to the moon in a different era, and it inspired a generation to strive for this seemingly impossible achievement, and it is worth pursuing if only to inspire international cooperation to achieve the unachievable.
Hmm.
I'd love to hear sort of your response to the public view of those who support that just doing something that big, bold, and audacious in and of itself is worthy of the investments required to accomplish it.
Hmm. Well, so once again, I'm going to tease two things apart that are often kind of conflated, and that is sending humans to Mars and colonizing Mars. So, sending astronauts or cosmonauts or whatever, whoever, whatever nation does it first, um, we if we send somebody to Mars and they land and they take, they take first steps and maybe they plant a flag, maybe we even get to the point like we did in the Apollo program where we send a little Jeep, like a little buggy, and they drive around or they play golf, all those incredible accomplishments that NASA achieved with the Apollo lunar landing program. If we did that on Mars, sure, you could make the same argument that this is a worthy thing to strive for, and that if we work together internationally, we can get it done more effectively and we can build bonds between nations. Yes, it is extremely expensive because keeping human beings alive in space, especially in deep space, is very difficult and costs a lot of money. And even just to send the necessary supplies and equipment to Mars is just it's so much more expensive than just sending a probe that doesn't need food, it doesn't need a place to sleep, it doesn't need oxygen, all these things. But I think that yes, you can certainly make an argument that it is worth it for inspiration, for public engagement, for the science value of what astronauts could accomplish while on Mars. Like if you send a geologist to Mars and they know exactly what types of rocks to look for to best answer the question of whether life has ever existed on Mars, that could have such scientific payoffs. But I think that all of those arguments kind of end with those boots and flags moments, as they say. So, the same reason that after the Apollo program ended, we didn't establish a permanent moon base, there's no real reason to do it. And I think you could say the same thing for Mars. Um, there's we don't gain that much more by living there than by just visiting if what you want is to this inspiring achievement. I think people like Musk, we have to bring him into this because I know he kind of taints everything a little bit for some people, but he has been one of the most vocal advocates for this, and his vision is to have what, like 1 million people living on Mars. That is a very different thing, and I think it requires a totally different framework to think about it. And that's because you have to ask yourself the question of what are all those people doing there? Who is paying for it, and how are they being supplied? Because if you look at, for example, the International Space Station, which is where we've had a permanent presence in space for decades, humans have been continuously operating the space station since I think 2000, 2001. It's been decades. But they have to be constantly supplied from Earth, and everything that they do is paid for by governments because there's no economic product that they're producing. And this gets down to like basics of sort of economics of if you have 1 million people on Mars, what are their jobs? What are they doing? What kind of value are they providing? Are they just there building settlements? And if so, who's paying for all of that? Because having the public pay for it back on Earth doesn't really make any sense. There's been, on the other hand, there's been talks of asteroid mining. So if you had a group of astronauts live on a asteroid and mine it for precious metals and then sell those precious metals to Earth, there you've got a viable colony. But a colony on Mars doesn't really make any sense. Um, and so I think I don't see it really happening, but just because it's so expensive and it doesn't really seem self-sustaining in any way. Um, there's, I'm sure, lots of people who strongly disagree with me, but that's my perspective on it.
What would you say about those who then take it to the next step and they say, well, we have to have viable alternatives in case we make the planet that we live on unsustainable, unlivable, or large sections of it. Now
Yeah.
we're getting off into a little bit of the distance there, but this has
Hmm.
been part of the public dialogue, and I think even Elon Musk and others have at least brought it up as a maybe 200 years from now kind of thing we should think about. Do you think there's any credibility at all to that, or we better figure it out on this planet, or we've got no plan B?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely worth addressing because it is a very popular perspective. My take on it is, how are we going to make the Earth more inhospitable to life than Mars already is? Like, in what scenario is it easier to maintain life on Mars, which has no magnetic field to protect from solar radiation, basically no atmosphere, certainly no breathable atmosphere, extremely low temperatures, no water? Like, there's a lot of reasons why it would be extremely difficult to live on Mars. I understand that we are doing terrible things to Earth and to the ecosystems that we depend on, and I do think that, that some bad things are going to happen in the future for humans if we don't correct that course. But I still don't think we're going to get to a point where it's more difficult to live on Earth than on Mars. Now, the flip side of this, I think, is the other common argument is that Earth's population is going to grow to the point that we can no longer rely on the resources that Earth can provide, and we will have to expand. There just won't be room for all of us here. And I would still say there are places on Earth that we have not expanded. Let's go to Antarctica. Yeah, it's not super hospitable, but you can breathe the air at least. I think there's a lot of Earth that we could expand to that makes so much more sense than expanding to another extremely hostile planet.